Welcome to episode 47 of the David Binkowski podcast. My guest today is an editor at the Dog Pound Daily, a senior writer for Winsidr.com. You may have seen her as a regular guest on the New York Post sports shows. You can follow her on Blue Sky at Ace Pedraza. Welcome to the podcast, Candace Pedraza. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. So we met through Blue Sky, and again, for those who aren't on there, I just want to plug this again. So Candace is on there under her name, as you see there. I'm under David Binkowski. You can find us by searching for us. I'll put the links in the description. But if you love the NBA, let's say, and you want to talk about the NBA and you love NBA games, there is a thriving community on Blue Sky. You don't have to support other platforms that are locked down or whatever issues you have with them. Blue Sky's open. Everyone can use it. Everyone's cool and friendly, and the games are actually fun. Now, Candace, I had you on because few episodes ago, I had my friend Bobby Seggs on. He's a Houston fan, and he said he is a Knicks hater because of the whole Patrick Ewing thing versus Akeem Olajuwon thing. So that'd only be fair to have a Knicks fan and someone who knows the game and all those things come on and talk about the Knicks. So I want to talk to you about their season because we all know this is like they made a bunch of moves, right? They made a bunch
Yep.
of moves. They lose the Villanova guys, they lose Dante, they break everything up, and they get rid of Julius Randle. So they bring in Cat. They had this great start. They went through injuries and resurgence. How would you talk about or evaluate the next season so far?
I think exactly what I would have anticipated it to be like, given that the makeup of the team changed so significantly. Julius Randle was kind of like, in my opinion, the face of the team for so long. Then Jalen Brunson comes in pretty quickly, takes those reins from him, but it wasn't in like a power grabby way, just in a natural order of things way. And I think that's when, the Knicks front office probably realized, hey, we should try to find someone that fits a little bit better alongside this very proven winning player. Not to say Julius Randle isn't a winning player, but unfortunately, because of injuries, he just was never able to prove himself as such, especially in the postseason for the Knicks. I still stand by the fact that if had he been healthy in the postseason last year, and then all the other Knicks hadn't just like in a domino effect, like gotten hurt like all at the same time during the postseason, I think they probably would have made it a very difficult series for the Boston Celtics had they been healthy. Didn't happen, obviously. So I was really expecting them to go into this season after the trade, having to work some things out. And I was also actually really concerned about Cat fitting into Tibbs' system because Tibbs is such a defensively minded coach. They had worked together before. That did not work out in Minnesota. So I was very worried about his fit. Ironically, he ended up being like the most seamless fit out of the two major trades that they made, and Mikal Bridges ended up being the guy that needed a while to adjust into the system. And so now that he's starting to gel, and he's had like two really excellent defensive performances in a row, one against Trae Young recently, and then the other night against the Memphis Grizzlies and against Ja Morant, he was just excellent defensively. If he's able to keep that up and that becomes more of a consistent thing for him and not like a streaky thing, then I'm feeling comfortable in saying that at this point in the season, they've gotten over those like very weird lulls that they were having defensively. If that's the case, then they are going to start to look very scary very soon. Just because with Boston struggling, Cleveland obviously starting to feel the wear and tear of the season. I think there's a very good shot of the Knicks starting to give them trouble, especially in the standing. So I would say if I had to grade the season so far, I would definitely give it like a B plus.
Yeah, a lot of GMs will talk about like 20 game marks, right? Every 20 games, where do we stand? What's our benchmark? I feel like the Knicks are more like on a 10 to 15 because of the new players. And it was like, okay, the first 10 to 15, how's Cat fitting in? Great, seamless, like you said. And then it's like, well, what about Bridges? He took a little longer to get going, right? That shot, and they changed his
Yeah.
shot, all those things, but then he finally got it going. And it's interesting. You talked about the Celtics and last year and how they could have matched up. And I think that the one thing that I'm interested to see as we continue this conversation and the season goes on is how are they going to handle a stretch five? Because I feel like Hartenstein could handle that. He was quick enough, physical enough. He can get out there and recover. Will Cat be able to do the same? That to me is one of the bigger questions. But when you look at the season overall, what's been the biggest surprise for you?
I would definitely say just the impact that Josh Hart specifically has had in trying to like make up, I would say, the defensive production or lack of it from OG Anunoby and from Mikal Bridges to start the season. That's been a huge surprise just because I wasn't expecting him to necessarily slip from last season. Like he was excellent, especially in the postseason, but I wasn't expecting him to kind of be like a fringe all-star. So far this season, I think if there was like a hustle spot on all-star teams, he would win it in a landslide. And so that's been a really big surprise and a big pleasant surprise to me is just the fact that he's been able to keep up that same level of production, despite getting less touches and despite kind of like moving around on the floor in terms of at positions. Um, I would say disappointment is probably going to be from OG and Mikal. But they're proving me wrong in that sense over the last couple of games. I think they both just needed rest. But I was really expecting OG to take a leap. Like, I don't know why I came into the season expecting him to kind of like really embrace that 3 and D role. I expected him to be hitting threes at a better clip than he is. Uh, Defensively, he's been excellent, but it's just the shooting that I really was anticipating to see some sort of like improvement. But he just hasn't hit that. But he's been great the past couple of games, so I'll give him that 100%. With Mikal, his shot started to fall, which was awesome, but then defensively, like he hasn't picked it up until very recently. But I think both of them were trying to figure out like their role on this team, especially with players like Cat, players like Jalen Brunson, who require the ball in their hands a lot, who draw a ton of attention. I think them figuring out how to fill their roles and kind of fill kind of the role of Dante DiVincenzo that he had last year and being like that disruptor, that's been kind of tough for them.
Yeah.
But I think they're starting to figure it out. But they've been a little disappointing, I would say.
Yeah. The Josh Hart role to me reminds me of my old Detroit teams, whether it was the Ben Wallace of the team or, Dennis Rodman of the team, the guy that's like, who's doing the dirty work? Who's like, we have all this talent and they all have such good specialties, things they can do. And what's the thing you need me to do? And I'll just do that and do it really, really well. And I think that
Yeah.
for me is like, I think every great team has to have that. I feel like in a way,
Yeah.
like the Celtics have a bunch of those guys, kind of like the Drew Holiday
Yeah.
types, all that. So I think every team has to have people who are willing to do that, right? And you see it with the Rockets, even with Amin Thompson. Like every good team, I think, has that guy. I don't know who that is for some of the other contenders. If I look at like the Cavs as an example, right? I could pick out a couple of guys from OKC, but Cavs, I don't know who you'd point to say that's the guy. If we need to stop, that's our point of attack guy. He's going to shut down whoever it is, or he's the hustle guy. I don't know that they have necessarily that. They do it kind of by committee more than anything else. But like you said, they're starting to slip a little bit. You talked about rest, so it'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the minutes and Tom Thibodeau and all those things. How would you assess him so far as a coach to this point in the season?
I always struggle to grade Tibbs's coaching just because I'll be so frustrated with his rotations. I'll be so frustrated with the amount of minutes that he's placing on his starters. And then I look at the Knicks record and I'm like, all right, like I guess I understand the logic to an extent. But I think after last postseason, he has to be wary of playing them too much because they just literally, I hate to put it like this, but like they dropped like flies in the postseason last year. And so I think a lot of that had to do with the lack of rest. I mean, Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart were putting up ridiculous minutes in the postseason. They barely had a center rotation after the 76ers series. Julius Randle was already out. Then you had Isaiah Hartenstein go down. So it was just too many things that added up to make fans realize again that they didn't love how he plays his starters so much. recently, I think he switched to a nine-man rotation as opposed to I think he was doing like a seven-man rotation, which is ridiculous to start the season that way. He switched to a nine-man rotation, and they're 4-0 since turning to that. Um, and I think that that's a huge growth moment for Tibbs, which is saying a lot because like he should have, grown in that respect by now. But I think that that shows that he's like getting a lot more trust, especially with like campaign and Landry Shamet. Precious Achua has definitely helped his case in managing to stay on the floor longer just because he has been excellent defensively as of late, been a lot more aggressive on offense as well. Um, so he's just starting to get that trust in his bench. And Deuce also, I think people forget, like he's dealt with injuries throughout this season. So there is another reason why a lot of minutes were being handed to the starters. Like Deuce just simply couldn't play and he's their sixth man. So now that he's healthy, you have Precious, you have Landry, and you have Cam. It's a pretty deep team all of a sudden. And so I would say for the last couple of games, I would give his coaching like an A, but to start the season, I would say probably more like a C, just because he was really working them, and it was just unnecessary at times.
Yeah, that's obviously like the criticism is the minutes and all those things. I always look at like everywhere he's gone, I want to see, and this is like they're not in a position. They're kind of like the Lakers in this sense. Not the current Lakers necessarily, but like the Lakers historically are not like they develop talent, but it's like for very specific things, right? And like I don't see a lot of Knicks saying like, "Oh my God, this guy came out and like everyone they've gotten has been like, yeah, we knew he was good. Like he had that potential already." And I don't see a lot of talent development under Thibs, but he does get the best out of his guys, whether it's because of the minutes or because of the consistency, which is the thing they were missing up until now, of having this cohesiveness and playing this much together. And I think it is he has to have learned because you cannot beat a deep team like the Celtics, a deep team like the Cavs, OKC. You can't beat them playing seven guys. There's no way
Yeah.
through this long of a season. If they had been bounced or didn't make the playoffs, then you can get that out of them for one postseason run. But like we're seeing with the Celtics, Derek White and Drew Holiday kind of had their struggles recently. Like they're exhausted, I'm sure. They've been playing almost year round. So it's a similar thing. I think once you get into playing too, it does drive me a little crazy when I see fans. That's not a thing. These are young guys. I'm like, have you ever played the game? Because
Yeah.
even in high school, playing a back to back is tough, let alone at the
Hmm.
pro level, right? So I do wonder, some of the commentary to me is like a little out there, but I hopefully he's
Yeah.
learned, it, and can make that adjustment. Because I'd like to see them go far. I think the league is better when the Knicks are good. Let's just be honest, right?
Yeah.
Um, what would you say would be the team's identity right now? Would they hang their hat on defense and threes? Would what where would you put that?
Yeah. I would say that it's starting to look very similar to I would say their identity from last season, which is just like we're gonna we're gonna grind out these wins no matter what. Like that is, I feel like the energy that they have, except it's much different from last year because they actually have like a competent offense. And so being able to score as well as play the same level of defense that they played last year, if not better, because OG and Mikhail are starting to like hit their stride, is very special. So I would say definitely just a very I don't even want to say grind it out because I feel like that is more like last year. And this year just feels a lot more easy. So I don't know. They're just fun. I
Yeah,
would say is the identity.
well, I think when you replace a guy that does like 5 foot push shots in Hartenstein with a guy who can stretch the floor, now that opens up
Hmm.
drives, back cuts, like that lends itself to easy baskets. And then I remember at the start of the season, I'm pretty sure they led the league in scoring at early on, right? They
Yeah.
were putting up
Hmm.
140 points a game, some crazy number. So,
Yeah.
if the offense is easy, that's a good thing. And then you already know that with Brunson, they can grind it out, right? So
Yeah.
and running the point and all that stuff. And that actually brings me to Jalen Brunson. So he finished
Yeah.
third in the East in All Star voting behind guards. I look, LaMelo Ball's fine. I think he's entertaining to watch,
Yeah.
but it's like last year, any Pistons fan that made the case for Cade trying to be in the All-Star game, you sound like an idiot. You're on the worst team in the league. And I feel the same for LaMelo.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you're putting up great numbers on 40 shots, on 25 plus shots a game. Of course, you're going to have good numbers.
Right.
So Jalen finished third in the East in All-Star voting, but he did make it as a starter, right?
Mhm.
You know, obviously, if you look at the number of guards in the East, he clearly is one of the top guards in the East. That's without
Yeah.
question.
100%. Hmm.
Amongst all NBA point guards, where would you rank him, including the West? I'm saying,
I he's definitely in the top 10 in my opinion.
and I think you have to be careful too because when you talk about point guards, you have like is Luka
Mhm.
Doncic a point guard? Is like because he does initiate the
Right.
offense, right? So there's the definition of what's a point guard is no longer the smallest guy on the floor who has the ball. Like, it's now like just whoever has the ball the most, you're by default the lead
Right.
guard, right? Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to, I mean, first put anyone ahead of Shea Gilgeous Alexander. Like that's kind of impossible. In my opinion, he's the best guard in the NBA right now. Um, Donovan Mitchell has been superb for the Cavs. I don't know if I would put him ahead of Brunson right now, which might be controversial, but they're definitely like I think on the same level. Um, so he's definitely on that list. It's weird because I don't know if I would put Steph on the list right now, which
yeah,
kind of sucks to say because he's starting to hit that time. Not even him, it's just the Warriors are starting to hit that time in his career where he's just unable to like carry the weight of that entire team. So that is starting to sink him. LaMelo Ball is excellent. He's an excellent point guard, but as you mentioned, he's an excellent point guard for a losing team. So it's very hard to put him in that conversation. I would say individually, though, he's definitely within that top 10. Um, it's tough. Trey Young, also excellent. I would say Jalen Brunson's definitely within the top 10 of
yeah.
point guards.
I'd put him top five, and here's why:
Well,
because like Trey Young, no defense, right? And
sure.
Trey's also making a concerted effort to not shoot just to get his assist numbers up, which is weird. When they played Detroit recently, he had he'd get chased off the 3-point line to a mid-range. He can make a mid-range shot. That's an easy shot. And he was
Yeah.
instead not even he reminded me of a young, inexperienced player in middle school who gets the ball, doesn't face the rim, and is immediately looking to pass to somebody else. Like it was that kind of like a what the hell is he doing moment. I'm like, just shoot the ball.
Yeah.
You know. So I think Trey is offensively, I think he's almost trying to prove a point that he can be a great assist guy and not be the lead scorer or
Okay.
whatever, but he doesn't
Hmm.
play defense. I mean, he's the guy when I look at, I like two-way guys. I like guys that it's like, is he the guy that when the other team needs a basket, are they trying to run the switch to get him on the top? Like, if that's the case, it's hard for me to make a case of someone being top five. It really is,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
So
that's
I
valid.
would I would put I would put Jalen in the top five, and that's even with my
Sure.
hatred of the head snapping and all that stuff. Like I can't stand that,
Sure.
but it is what
Yeah.
it is. I know it's part of the game. I know I'm an old head too. It just drives me nuts. What about Cat?
Valid.
What's your take on Cat so far this year?
Oh man, I mean, he is better than advertised. I think the only thing that like Minnesota fans have been really harping on, probably partially just out of like pain of having lost him in this trade, is just, oh, but wait till the postseason, wait till the playoffs where, he tends to disappear. I don't think that that's going to be the case when the Knicks go to the postseason. And last year he was excellent in the postseason. So I'm not too concerned about that. I think he's going to rise to the occasion. He's shown that he can play in New York. Um, I've had literally zero complaints about Cat this entire season. He's been amazing, and I mean this as no disrespect to Julius Randle, who I love, but being able to replace his production with Cat's is like night and day.
Yeah,
Just in terms of on offense specifically. Um, His defense also hasn't been terrible, which was the other thing that Minnesota fans were kind of harping on as well after the trade, just speaking to his inability to protect the rim. That was always going to be an issue with Mitchell Robinson not coming back for the first part of the season. So I always knew it was going to be a struggle regardless, but I think he's starting to kind of figure out his timing. And with Precious kind of figuring things out in that end as well, it's opened things up for him defensively. Um, and so that's been great.
Yep.
I literally have nothing. No cons for Cat.
I think the thing that's been underrated through, and we're seeing it on display now is his passing. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
every couple. I see a highlight come across the feed every once in a while, and it's like, wow, like that. Where was this? Not that he couldn't do it, but just the style they play. And again, when you're a stretch five, takes the rim protector away, which opens up everybody else to make those back cuts and take advantage of aggressive defenses. So, but the passing's been phenomenal. We already talked
Yeah.
about Josh Hart, so I'm not sure there's much more to say there. What about Bridges? So let's get into his game just a little bit. So I struggled to start the year, then was on a heater for a while there, and now he's kind of settled in with the team. Where do you see his role kind of progressing as the season goes on? Do you think he can be the guy he was in Brooklyn, where if they need a bucket and let's say Jalen is hurt out of the game, whatever, could he be the second scorer? Could he be the guy that leads a bench unit for potentially alongside Deuce, alongside whoever to help get a bucket if need be?
Yeah. At this point, yes, I do trust him to be that guy. I don't know about earlier in the season, but now I think that he's figured out how to get to his spots, has seemingly really perfected that mid-range shot. He doesn't need to rely on living at the three-point line as much as he was trying to at the beginning of the year. And so that's been fantastic. So on offense, I'm not too worried about him just because I knew he would figure that part out eventually. I knew that he hadn't suddenly become like a really terrible player after being such a great one for the like his entire career. Um, he just needed to settle in, it seems, especially into a specific role on the team where he's probably the third option. And going from first to third can be tough. Um, but he seems very comfortable now. Defensively, I love that he has been getting the assignments on smaller guards because that takes so much off of Jalen Brunson defensively, and that's been key. The Memphis Grizzlies game is a great example, and the Atlanta Hawks game is a great example. Like, Jalen Brunson did not have to guard Trae Young, which is great because I've seen him get cooked by him enough too many times. And so it just makes sense to plug Bridges on him, and he really took up that challenge. Same thing with the Grizzlies game. And even if you don't have Bridges on him, you could put Deuce on him, who's a much better defender than Jalen Brunson is. And that's opened things up. So I would say maybe the first half of the season, I felt very wary about Bridges. I did not trust his defense. I felt like he was more of a liability on the floor than a help. Last couple of games, I've definitely warmed up to him and felt like this is the Bridges that they traded for, this version
Right.
of him. This feels more like who he is actually as a player. That's why I feel good about the chances of this not being like just like a streaky defensive moment in the season for him. I think he's gonna keep on this trajectory.
Yeah, he's finally kind of showing who he was again, right?
Yeah.
Um, when we talked about almost the whole roster, at least the guys who played, they're going nine deep now. But when you get to the playoffs, things can change as the season goes on. Other teams look to expose weaknesses and all those things. If you had to come up with a player at a position where you feel that they need to make a trade, let's say, because they have play. If they're going nine deep, then they could probably package a couple guys and get somebody, send out assets, whatever. Who would you like to see them try to get for a deep playoff run?
I just want them to get a wing. That's it. That's pretty much it. I feel like the player that I specifically would have loved to have seen them try to get is maybe Najee Marshall, from Dallas. Ironically, Quentin Grimes would be awesome for them right now, but I don't think I think they've moved on from his days. with the Knicks, so I don't think that they would try to get him back in any sort of trade. But I really like Najee Marshall. Um, I think he would be a really good fit for them, especially on the bench. Great two-way player. And I did see yesterday that Chris Boucher was apparently a player that they were potentially interested in talking to the Raptors about. Another very decent wing player that I feel like would fit very well in that second unit. They just need depth at that position, which is ironic because I feel like a couple of years ago I was just like, they have no guards. This is crazy, and now they have too many. Um, but I think that they're probably not going to do anything at the trade deadline because I think that they probably feel like unless they're blown away by an offer for Mitchell Robinson, they're good with what they have in terms of the roster because once he comes back, that opens up even more for them in terms of lineups, in terms of how much deeper they can go on the bench. Um, so it would be cool to see them try to land another wing, but given just how few draft picks they have now because of the Mikal Bridges trade, how few contracts they have available to trade that I feel like they wouldn't even want to move off of. And with Mitchell Robinson hopefully coming back very soon, they're just going to consider him like the move,
The
which
acquisition,
was
yeah.
yeah, put very greatly by James Edwards in The Athletic. Like that seems to be the expected move for
Yeah,
the Knicks is just to get him back.
I do have a message for James Edwards. Love you, James. Love you when you covered Detroit. You know that. Stop trying to get beef stewed in New York. It's not going to happen. All right. Just
Oh
stop putting
yeah,
him
he
in fake
really
trades. They would never give up on him. Like he literally is the best rim protector right now in the NBA, even as an undersized center.
yes.
Detroit is not trading him. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
I feel the same way you do about they don't know what they have even this far into the season because they're not complete. So making a trade feels like premature, or even
Yeah.
and we're about a week away from the trade deadline, but it just feels premature to even think about it when you still don't know what you have. And like you said, because of the assets, I think they're better off standing pat because if they've shown with this current roster minus Robinson that they can that's all they're maybe missing, I would just stand pat and see where it shakes
Mhm.
out. Um, Looking ahead at the playoffs, where do you think they can jump Cleveland? Do you think they can make a push to jump Boston? Like, could you see them getting up as high as the 1 or 2 seed potentially once they are whole and once they're healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I could see them. I think Cleveland's locked up the one seed. They just feel like too cohesive. They have really great chemistry. Um, with the way Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are playing together too, like they're starting to hit their peak. I'm gonna say I think they stay the one seed, which is fantastic for them. Um, Fantastic for the Knicks too, because I don't want them seeing them for a while in the postseason if possible. Um, I can see them jumping to two though. And that's no knock on Boston. I'm never gonna bet against the former champion who literally hasn't changed much to their roster. But I think that they are, yeah, definitely just in a weird rut right now where they look like the Boston that I was questioning last year, before they just like really locked in, which is to say, I feel like they don't know who that guy is that's going to take like that final shot, who's going to be like the leader of the team in those like crunch time moments. And it's weird that they've gotten back to that point because it felt like they had figured it out, and just, played it by ear at the end of those games. That Rockets game specifically sticks out to me. But they feel like they need to make a move. I think Boston definitely does need to make a move, maybe for like an extra rim protector or just another center, um, just because they can't rely on Kristaps Porzingis to be 100% for an entire year. Al Horford, unfortunately, is just getting up there in age. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. I could see them falling to three and then Knicks sliding into that two seed for sure.
Yeah, I hope my Pistons make it. And of all
Oh,
the
they will.
teams, Of all the teams, well, of all the teams that they'd have to face, I'm undecided. Because early when the Knicks were, we beat Detroit's beaten the Knicks twice at MSG. So like awesome, that's great. Again,
Yeah,
circumstantial. It's a circumstance. The game, the year has ebbs and flows to it. You hit teams the right time, the wrong time. The Knicks had not pulled it all together during at that point. I'm not even sure they were fully healthy either. I think Cat maybe played, but they were on a back to back. Like just there's circumstantial reasons as to why some teams that are good can beat a team that's better than them. Um, at one point, I was thinking, I want Detroit to play New York because Thibs will run these guys into the ground and then they'll be exhausted and we're younger and deeper. And, I don't know that's going to be the case at this point since he's switched to
yeah,
this 9-man rotation. And also because we've been exposed. We don't have another ball handler behind Cade. So when he's out, we are losing those minutes badly, like badly. So
yeah.
we'll see what happens if the Pistons do make a move to try to help out with that. If Ivy does come
Mhm.
back, all those things. But I think the Knicks can get as high as two as well. I don't see a reason why they can't. If Boston's in this malaise, whether guys are tired or whatever, this is a perfect time to catch up and make up that ground on them and take a
Yeah.
number two spot. So I think that's the thing. Now, how far do you think they could go? Who's your ideal matchup for them? Like as they go in that first round, let's say they make it to two, who's the ideal, opponent for them to get all the way to what's that path for them look like? And how far do you think they can go?
Yeah. I mean, I would love for them to ideally face a team maybe with less experience. I think that would probably be like the best path for them. So maybe a team like Detroit would be like a team that I think would be best, quote unquote, for them to face in the first round. But I think Detroit is a great team. As you said, I think they just need another ball handler. The Jaden Ivey injury just sucks
Yeah,
because he was playing so well. I think the Knicks need to just hope they aren't facing a team like Orlando in the first round because they are just a team of hammers, in my opinion. And I really enjoy a lot of the Orlando Magic players. However, every time they play the Knicks, I'm like petrified of someone getting hurt on either team. Because they just play so physically. They play such a physical defense, and it's like almost not enjoyable because it's just so like kind of edge of your seat to watch happen. Because the Knicks tend to then match that same energy and try to play as physically, but I just don't think that they're as like this iteration of the Knicks aren't as comfortable playing that physically as Orlando seems to be now. So I would hate to face a team like Orlando. Um, I would say prior to the Atlanta Hawks losing Jalen Johnson today, I would hate for them to face the Hawks as well in the first round for similar reasons. Their defense is excellent. I don't like how Dyson Daniels is able to kind of easily get under Jalen Brunson's skin at times. So teams like that, like very like gritty teams that might not necessarily have like the talent that the Knicks have on offense,
yeah,
but can really wear them down.
yeah,
So and that's not to say, oh, I would prefer they play Boston or something in the first round because that would suck too. But, these are teams that they're probably going to have to face in the first round because if they're the two seed, they're going to see a play-in team or a team that's really just fighting to stay in the
yeah.
postseason in that first round. So I don't know if there's any like ideal matchups for them, just preferably at least in the first round or two. Uh, no injuries would be cool. And uh just a team that isn't like yanking players by their ankles, just
Yeah. I have a
hypothetically.
I have a problem with the Magic and how they play. I had someone say that, well, you're a bad boys Detroit guy, so shouldn't you love this? And I'm like, I don't like watching my best player break his leg because someone dove into him. No, I don't like this. Like this is
Right,
not.
literally exactly.
If I had my druthers, I'd rather watch the Boston Celtics shoot 5,000 threes than watch that. Than watch the potential of your best player. There was even a play in the Magic game the other day where Cade was chasing down a loose ball with Suggs or whoever, and here comes Franz, runs up two-handed, shoves Cade right in front of the ref, no call. Didn't go for the ball, just ran over and shoved him
Yep.
into the front row, no call. And it's like, I'm sorry, but if you're the league, on some level, you have to protect your players. This is their
Mhm.
livelihood. And so if that's how they're going to let them play, then let us bring a goon on the let's be like the old hockey days where we're going to have a goon
Sure.
on the team, or even the old Detroit days where we're going to throw some Bill Lambier elbows in your face. And like, I mean, is that what they want things to devolve into? Because that's what will happen eventually. You do it enough
Mhm.
times, the bully does get punched back in the mouth, and then it's like, well, who hit us? Why? Well, you allowed this. You set this up. So I think it's garbage basketball. I think it is masking their lack of offensive talent. So they have
Mhm.
to play
Mhm.
that way to get under your skin, to beat you up. Like if they can't do that, they would lose games by 20 or 30 points because they are offensively not as talented. And I think it's kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous that they have an exception that one team gets to play that way. But like when a team like Detroit has Asar Thompson put a hand on a guy, not even like
Yeah.
he doesn't lose the ball, doesn't change direction on the dribble, just puts a hand on him. That's a foul. It's like, wait a minute here. Like this is clearly two sets of rules here. So not a fan of it. I just want consistency. And like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, we want to watch good basketball, not
Yeah.
football. Not football. And
Yeah.
again, I like physical basketball, but like I'd rather see it on the guards. Like, hey, if you're gonna drive, I get to like push you a little bit. That's cool. I don't mind that. But
Right.
diving into guys, shoving guys out of bounds, what are we doing here? So, all right, let's get in
Yeah.
some rapid fire questions. So, I want to ask you, what's your favorite Knicks memory of all time?
So that would definitely have to be a Jeremy Lin moment. Because I think it was the Valentine's Day game against the Raptors. And this was like right when he was hitting the peak of
Of
like
Linsanity,
Linsanity.
yeah,
And he hit that buzzer beater. And this is like when I first started to watch the Knicks when I was younger. And like I loved the Raymond Felton teams, like Steve Novak teams pre Carmelo Anthony. I was like super into them. And then Jeremy Lin comes in, hits that game winner, and I just remember like doing laps around my house and screaming because it was just so wild to see. Like I was not used to the Knicks winning games like that. I was used to other teams winning games against the Knicks like that. So that was fantastic, and that memory always sticks out in my mind. Definitely is like one of the best memories. A close second though is definitely the Dante three-pointer from this past postseason.
yeah. The two great memories. I mean, it's hard to like Linsanity was such a time capsule, right? Like I think
Yeah.
everybody remember everyone who was anyone who was old enough to remember that period in history, in Knicks history remembers that, and the whole league remembers it because it was like where did this guy come from and what is he doing, and it became like must see TV type of thing. So everybody was tuning in to
hmm
watch that one. Who do you think is the most underrated Knicks player of all time?
I guess I would have to go Raymond Felton, who I was like I had such an affinity for him as like a guard because he did not look like he should have been as good at basketball as he was. Um, like he was just like this short, stocky dude, kind of like Jalen Brunson, but even stockier than Jalen Brunson, and just like streaking up the court, like hitting threes. And yeah, prior to the Melo trade, I was like, this dude is gonna lead the Knicks to glory. Like I love him. He was just such a Knicks player too, because I feel like he was just so gritty. Like he sacrificed like his body every single game, despite them being not that good before the Melo trade. Um, yeah, I will always love Raymond Felton for sure.
Uncle Ray was like legit. I call him that because he looks like someone's uncle that walked in off the street. You're like, who's this guy? Got a beard belly? Like, how's this guy
Yeah.
playing? But he'd come out and just go on a heater for like 5 straight minutes, 6 straight minutes. You're like, where did this come from? And like, I don't know that it was ever like, well,
Yeah.
especially towards the end of his career, like this is not sustainable. There was like a literally like, all right, get him out. Like he's
Yeah.
gassed.
No.
He gave us his 5 minutes, get him off. But he was like just one of those guys. He reminded me of a Vinnie Johnson type, where it's like same like stocky guy. You're like, what, how is this guy good? Vinnie Johnson shooting the ball from behind his head, like, but yet it's going in. Just similar
Yeah.
vibes, similar vibes. If you could add one legend of the Knicks legend to this team right now, who would it be? It's got to be Ewing, right? It's got to be Ewing as a backup center. Come
As a
on.
backup, that's crazy. I don't know if I can make him a backup. I would feel bad adding him. If Ewing was the backup on this team, they're going to the finals, they're winning it. And that's that. So I guess I actually, yeah, I would have to add him. I was gonna say Melo just because I'm like they need that shooting, they need that depth off the bench, and like if they could get like 2012, 13 Melo onto this team, like
Oh, there you
forget
go.
it.
Yeah.
Best
What?
offense in history.
Yeah. What's one bold prediction you have for your Knicks for the rest of the season?
I think that they are, despite having such a slow start to the year defensively, they're going to finish the year top five in defensive rating.
That would not surprise me. That would not surprise Tibbs coach team finishing top five in defense would not surprise me, but I like the pick.
Yeah.
So let's tell the people where they can find you, by the way. Where I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. First of all, if you made it all the way through, thank you for listening and watching. Candace, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I currently work as a site editor for Dog Pound Daily, which is a fan-sided uh, site that covers the Cleveland Browns. So if you're into the NFL or the Browns, I'm sorry. But I write about them. So if you wanted to follow my work on that, that is where most of my stuff lives. And I'm also a senior writer for Winsidr, and that is a site that covers everything WNBA related, women's college basketball, as well as some about the new women's basketball league, Unrivaled. So those would be, I think, the two biggest places, and occasionally doing my own Knicks writing on my blog, which is called Ace Talks Ball.
Wonderful. Candace, thank you so much for joining us. Again, you can follow her on Blue Sky, CandacePedraza.bsky.social. Please make sure you give her a follow. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe. If you've not already done so, give us a 5-star review. Candace, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much.